Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was reborn in Konosuba and built a harem with Aqua, Megumin, and Darkness? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Sage of the Starting Town. The last thing Naruto Uzumaki felt was peace. It was a foreign sensation, one he'd only ever glimpsed in the quiet moments after a hard-won battle or in the shared sea. Lengths of a ramen stand with an old teacher. But this was different. This was a profound, bone-deep stillness, a final exhalation after a lifetime of drawing breath only to shout, to fight, to strive. The air, thick with ozone and the dust of a crumbling dimension, did not burn his lungs. The catastrophic energy of Kagaya's final, desperate remnant, a cancerous seed of pure power that threatened to unmake reality, was no longer a raging star against his skin. It was inside him now, a roaring bonfire he had willingly swallowed. His own chakra, a sea cultivated over 18 years of relentless effort, was the cage. And his life force was the lock. He could feel himself coming apart. Not in a painful, violent way, but like a sandcastle yielding to the tide. The edges of his vision softened, blurring the faces of his friends. Sasuke, his arm gone, his expression a mask of shocked understanding. Sakura, tears carving clean paths through the grime on her cheeks, her hand outstretched as if she could still pull him back. Kakashi, his gaze distant, already mourning. His six-paths sage mode, the golden cloak of power that had made him a near god, flickered and died, not from exhaustion, but from a gentle, deliberate release. He was letting go. The power had served its purpose. He had saved them. All of them. The war was over. Truly, finally over. The endless cycle of hatred, for one generation at least, had been broken by his own two hands. A faint smile touched his lips. He'd done it. He'd kept his promise. He had protected his precious people. He had become Hokage in all but name. I did enough, he thought. And the thought was a release. The roaring bonfire within him consumed the last of its fuel, and with a final, silent flare of golden light, Naruto Uzumaki was gone. The world was safe, and he was, at long last, at rest. Then, he opened his eyes. He was sitting in a surprisingly comfortable armchair, the kind he imagined rich old men owned. The space around him was an endless, featureless white. Clean and sterile. Opposite him, behind a ridiculously ornate desk, sat a woman. She had long, beautiful blue hair tied in a distinctive loop, and wore a celestial-looking raiment with a translucent, flowing scarf that seemed to move on its own. She was, objectively, one of the most beautiful women he had ever seen. She was also filing her nails with an air of profound boredom. "Right, let's get this over with," she said without looking up, her voice a melodic but utterly disinterested chime. Naruto Uzumaki died aged 18, 'cause of death. Heroic self-sacrifice via soul-based containment of a world-ending energy source. Blah, blah, very noble. Congratulations, you get the premium afterlife package. She finally looked up, her blue eyes scanning him with a practiced, dismissive air. You have two choices. You can ascend to heaven to live a boring, non-corporeal existence among other heroes, basking in eternal glory and all that nonsense. No more ramen, by the way. Big downside. She paused, as if waiting for a reaction. Naruto said nothing. He just watched her, his expression calm and patient. The weariness of his final moments clung to him like a shroud, but beneath it, his mind was clear. This wasn't the pure land his masters had spoken of. This was an office. Her brow twitched in annoyance at his silence. Or, she continued, her voice taking on a practiced, sales pitch cadence. You can be reborn into a fantastic, sword and sorcery world. A world threatened by a demon king, full of quests, monsters, and adventure. It's our most popular option. And because you died so heroically, you get to take one thing with you. Any one thing. A powerful weapon, a god-tier ability, an ultimate skill, you name it. A cheat, if you will, to give you a head start. She leaned forward, a condescendingly bright smile plastered on her face. So, what'll it be, hero? I am the goddess Aqua, and I will be the one to guide you to your new life. Naruto considered her words. A new world. Adventure. A demon king. It sounded like the plot of a Jiraiya novel. A part of him, the loud-mouthed, hyperactive boy he used to be, might have jumped at the chance. But that boy was long gone. Buried under the weight of a war and the responsibility for an entire world. No, thank you, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Aqua's smile froze, cracking at the edges. What did you say? I've had enough adventure, Naruto clarified, his gaze steady. I fought in a war. I saw more than enough monsters. I just saved my world from its own demon king. I'm tired. I think I'll take the first option. Heaven sounds fine. Aqua stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. This was not in the script. People were supposed to weep with gratitude. They were supposed to agonize over which overpowered cheat to pick. They were supposed to be thrilled. But you can't. She stammered, losing her divine composure. It's so boring. You just float and sing for eternity. What kind of hero wants that? Think of the thrill, the battles, the ladies who will flock to a powerful adventurer. I have no interest in fighting anymore, Naruto said, and the simple finality in his tone seemed to echo in the white void. And the only people I care about are back home. Aqua was completely flustered now. She stood up, slamming her hands on her desk. Look, you have to. The other world needs heroes. The balance of good and evil is getting seriously out of whack, and we're losing souls to the Demon King's army left and right. A guy with your specs, she gestured vaguely at a floating ethereal screen next to her that Naruto hadn't noticed before. You're a once-in-a-millennium soul. Your potential is off the charts. You can't just waste it on harp lessons. Naruto glanced at the screen. It was filled with lines of a language he didn't recognize, but he could feel the power it was attempting to quantify. His power. It felt strange, seeing his life reduced to a stat sheet. He looked back at the goddess. For the first time, he looked past the arrogant smirk and the condescending tone. He saw the desperation in her eyes, the flicker of genuine panic. He saw the way her divine facade was chipping, revealing something lonely and insecure underneath. She wasn't a serene, all-powerful being. She was a stressed-out middle manager trying to hit a quota. And in that moment, she reminded him of himself. The brash, loud-mouthed kid who put on a show to hide how alone he really was. An idea, quiet and unexpected, sparked in his mind. He had died to find peace. But maybe peace wasn't sitting on a cloud. Maybe peace was a choice. A new start. A chance to build something without the weight of prophecy and hatred on his shoulders. His gaze flickered around the empty white room. Then back to the frantic goddess. He thought of the cheat she offered. A weapon. He had been a weapon. An ability. He had wielded the power of a god. He didn't need any of those things. He needed something else. A connection, perhaps. A purpose that wasn't about saving the world, but maybe just living in it. All right, he said, and Aqua stopped her tirade, blinking in surprise. I'll go to the new world. A brilliant, triumphant smile bloomed on her face. Excellent. I knew you'd see reason. Now, let's get back to your cheat item. I personally recommend the Divine Blade, Excalibur. I've made my choice. Naruto interrupted calmly. Aqua puffed up, annoyed again. Oh, and what peerless artifact has caught your eye? Let me guess, the Aegis shield. The Staff of Ages. Naruto stood up from the armchair. He was a few inches taller than her, and the simple act of him rising to his full height seemed to subtly shift the power dynamic in the room. He met her blue eyes, his own gaze holding a strange mix of amusement and empathy. I choose you. The silence that followed was absolute. Aqua's brain seemed to buffer, her smile twitching, then collapsing entirely. Me. I don't understand. I'm a goddess. I'm not a thing. You can just. You said I could choose any one thing, Naruto stated, his voice unwavering. And you're the one sending me. It's a rule of this world, isn't it? A law. A goddess can't be taken as a cheat item. A flicker of pure, undiluted panic flashed in her eyes. He'd hit the mark. Well, yes, technically, but no one's ever been stupid enough to. Suddenly, a brilliant magical circle bloomed on the floor at her feet, bathing her in a column of golden light. A disembodied, angelic female voice echoed through the void. The rule is absolute. The chosen item, Aqua, has been accepted. We will dispatch a replacement to handle your duties. We wish you success in your quest to defeat the Demon King. Aqua froze, a statue of horror. Wait, no, you can't. I'm a goddess. I have followers. I have responsibilities. This human is an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. Reverse it. Another circle of light formed at Naruto's feet. He looked at her, a wry grin on his face. Looks like we're a party. Don't worry, I'll take care of you. I don't want you to take care of me. She shrieked, tears already welling up. I'm a goddess. I'm supposed to be worshipped and revered, not dragged into some muddy backwater world by a delinquent with weird whiskers. The light intensified. The angelic voice spoke one last time. Be well, adventurer. Be well, former goddess Aqua. Your journey begins now. No. Her scream was cut off as the world dissolved into a blinding flash. The first thing Naruto registered was the smell. It was a rich, earthy mix of manure, baking bread, damp cobblestone, and unwashed bodies. The second was the noise. The clatter of wagon wheels, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, the cacophony of 100 different conversations. The third was the sensation of solid, uneven ground beneath his feet. He stood in the middle of a bustling town square, a large fountain bubbling at its center. The buildings were half-timbered, looking like something out of a fairy tale. People in simple, rustic clothes milled about, paying them no mind. It was all so wonderfully, messily alive. Wah! The illusion of peace was shattered by the heartbroken, full-throated sob of the goddess next to him. Aqua was on her hands and knees, pounding her fists on the cobblestones. It's real. It's real. I'm stuck here, in a world with toilets that are probably just holes in the ground. My comfortable afterlife is gone. My adoring junior goddesses are gone. My high-quality celestial liquor is gone. Naruto sighed, a sound of weary patience. He looked down at his own clothes. He was no longer in the tattered remains of his battle gear, but in a simple black shirt, durable-looking black pants, and a garish orange jacket. He grimaced. Some cosmic entity clearly had a sense of humor. At least he had his shinobi sandals and the pouch on his hip, which felt comfortingly familiar. He crouched down beside the wailing goddess. All right, that's enough. Crying isn't going to get us anywhere. What would you know? She wailed, her face streaked with dirt and tears. You're just a mortal. I'm a divine being, reduced to this. We have no money, no home, no way to even eat. Her stomach punctuated the statement with a loud, pathetic growl. Naruto stood up, scanning the square. People were starting to stare. Okay, first things first. Money for food. Stay here. Don't move. Where are you going to get money? She sniffled, looking up at him with puffy, distrustful eyes. Naruto just smiled. I'm resourceful. He walked over to the central fountain. A group of children were laughing, trying to scoop up the small, glimmering coins that locals and travelers had tossed in for luck. One boy, reaching too far, accidentally knocked a small handful of copper coins into the deepest part of the basin, well out of reach. The boy's face fell. Naruto approached him. Trouble. The boy pointed a chubby finger. My lunch money. It fell in. Naruto looked into the water. It was at least 5 feet deep in the center. Without a word, he focused a minuscule amount of chakra to the soles of his feet. He took a step, and his sandal rested perfectly on the surface of the water. He took another, walking to the center of the fountain as if it were solid ground. A collective gasp went through the crowd. The children's jaws dropped. Aqua, who had been watching from the sidelines, stopped crying, her eyes wide with disbelief. Priests of her own cult could perform a similar feat, but it took immense concentration and was a high-level party trick. This man did it as easily as breathing. Naruto bent down, his hand skimming the surface. He scooped up the fallen coins, plus 1 extra for good measure, and walked back. He knelt and pressed the coins into the stunned boy's hand. There you go. Be more careful next time. The boy could only nod dumbly. Naruto stood and was about to walk away when a portly merchant, who had been watching the whole display, hurried over. Excuse me, young man. That was incredible. A miracle. Just a little trick, Naruto said dismissively. A trick, my boy, that was divine. The merchant's eyes gleamed. Listen, I've got a cart of heavy textiles that needs unloading around the back of my shop. My usual boy's called in sick. It's a two-man job, take half the day. I'll pay you well for your assistance. Naruto considered it. It was a start. I can do it in 5 minutes. The merchant laughed. Ambitious. I like that, but impossible. It's half a ton of fabric. Naruto simply held up a single finger, weaving a sign so fast it was a blur. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a soft poof of smoke, a perfect, solid replica of Naruto appeared beside him. The clone grinned and gave the merchant a thumbs up. Ready when you are, boss. The merchant's jaw hit the floor. The crowd murmured in shock and awe. Even Aqua looked utterly poleaxed. Clones were illusions, ethereal things. This one was solid. It had presence. Naruto turned to the merchant, his expression calm. 5 minutes. Double the pay. The merchant, speechless, could only nod frantically. 20 minutes later, Naruto and Aqua were sitting in a noisy, cheerful tavern. It was the Adventurers Guild. In front of them sat 2 plates of steaming steak and a loaf of fresh bread. Aqua, her previous despair forgotten, was tearing into her food like a starved animal. Naruto had dismissed his clone after they'd moved the entire cart's contents into the warehouse in under 3 minutes, a feat which earned him a hefty bag of coin and the merchant's stammering, eternal gratitude. This is good, Aqua said through a mouthful of steak. Not divine realm ambrosia, but for mortal food, it's top tier. You're surprisingly useful for a human who kidnapped a goddess. I told you I'd take care of you, Naruto replied, eating his own meal at a more sedate pace. He was observing the guild hall, taking everything in. Rough-looking men and women in various states of armor and adventuring gear were laughing, drinking, and posting notices on a large quest board. It reminded him of the mission assignment desk in Konoha, only much louder and with more beer. A bubbly, blonde-haired woman in a revealing outfit approached their table. Welcome to the Axel Adventurers Guild. Are you two looking to register? Aqua, puffed up with pride, slammed her tankard down. You are in the presence of the goddess Aqua. I have graciously decided to lend my power to your little guild. You should be honored. The guild receptionist, Luna, gave her a practiced, patient smile. Of course, dear, we'll just need you to place your hand on this crystal to generate your adventurer card. She produced a device with a glowing blue orb. Aqua placed her hand on it imperiously. The device whirred and spat out a card. Luna picked it up and read it. Her smile became a little strained. Welcome, Aqua-san. Your stats are exceptionally high. All well above average, except what? Aqua demanded. Your intelligence is below average, and your luck is rock bottom. Aqua snatched the card, her face turning a dangerous shade of red. This machine is broken. I am a goddess. My stats should be maxed out. Naruto sighed and placed his own hand on the orb. It glowed with a brilliant, blinding golden light, far more intense than it had for Aqua. The machine whirred violently, shook, and then spat out a card with a puff of smoke. Luna picked it up, her eyes widening. She blinked, rubbed them, and looked again. This can't be right. What is it? Naruto asked. All of your stats. They're so high they won't register. They're just question marks. And your class. She looked at him, her voice a whisper. It just says, Sage. What does that even mean? Before Naruto could answer, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Behold, I am Megumin, an arch-wizard who wields the most powerful offensive magic, explosion. I have walked the path of explosions for my entire life. I seek companions to walk this crimson path with me. A young girl stood there, no older than 13 or 14, striking a dramatic pose. She wore a witch's hat, a black cloak, and an eye patch, one hand held dramatically over her face. She was tiny, but her voice was full of unshakable conviction. The guild hall was silent for a moment, then went back to its business. A few adventurers snickered. Oh, it's the explosion girl again, someone muttered. She can only cast one spell a day, then she's useless. The girl, Megumin, looked crestfallen as no one approached her. Naruto watched her, not with derision, but with a flicker of understanding. Dedication to a single, ultimate art. It reminded him of his own obsessive quest to perfect the Rasengan. He stood up and walked over to her. Aqua watched him go, muttering, Don't tell me you're recruiting that weirdo. You're looking for a party? Naruto asked the girl. Megumin's one visible red eye lit up with hope. You are an adventurer of discerning taste. You recognize my supreme power. I recognize dedication, Naruto said. Let's see what you can do. We're taking a quest. We need the money. He walked to the quest board, pulling down a simple request. Cull the giant toad population outside the city. The reward was decent. Perfect, Megumin declared. The soft, fleshy bodies of giant toads are an ideal canvas for my explosion art. An hour later, they were standing in a grassy field dotted with ponds. The giant toads were the size of small houses. All right, Naruto said, assessing the situation. There are 5 of them. Megumin, you said your spell has a large area of effect. It is the ultimate expression of destructive force. It will annihilate them all, she proclaimed, beginning a long, complicated chant. Wait, Naruto said, holding up a hand. Don't cast it yet. Aqua, can you do anything besides complain? HMPH. I am a master of water-based and support magic, she declared. I can purify water and perform dazzling party tricks. One of the toads croaked, its enormous yellow eyes fixing on her. Its long, sticky tongue shot out. Kyaaa. Aqua shrieked as the tongue wrapped around her waist and dragged her, struggling, toward the toad's gaping maw. She was swallowed whole, her screams muffled. Megumin, who had been about to start her chant again, froze in horror. Aqua was eaten. Naruto didn't panic. He closed his eyes. Orange pigment appeared around them as he instantly entered sage mode. The world resolved into a symphony of life energy. He could feel the toad's large, sluggish presence, and within it, the smaller, terrified, and very slimy signature of Aqua. He moved. He was a blur of orange and black, closing the 50 yards to the toad in an instant. He leapt, and in his right hand, a sphere of swirling, perfectly controlled blue chakra whirred to life. A Rasengan. But this wasn't the giant, world-breaking version he'd used in the war. It was small, compact, a tool of precision. He didn't slam it into the toad's head. He pressed it gently against its thick, rubbery hide, right above its stomach. The sphere spun, releasing a concussive blast of pure kinetic force. The toad's eyes rolled back in its head, its body went limp, and it slumped to the ground, stunned but not killed. A moment later, it regurgitated a slime-covered, weeping Aqua. Megumin stared, her jaw on the ground. She had felt the power in that blue sphere. It was dense, controlled, and utterly overwhelming. He hadn't needed a chant. He hadn't needed any preparation. He had just done it. And with a level of control she couldn't comprehend. He could have blown the creature to bits, but he chose to merely incapacitate it to save his companion. You're amazing, she whispered, her dramatic persona forgotten. Naruto deactivated Sage Mode, the orange markings fading. Are you okay, Aqua? I'm covered in goo, she sobbed. It smells horrible. I'm traumatized. She immediately cast a spell on herself. Purification. A column of light washed over her, cleaning the slime away instantly. Right, you're fine, Naruto said, his patience wearing thin. He turned to Megumin. Okay, new plan. I'll draw their attention. You get ready to cast. Aqua, you stay back and try not to get eaten again. He made a cross-shaped hand sign. Mass Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a series of loud poofs, 24 Naruto Uzumakis filled the field. The clones, all grinning, charged at the remaining 4 toads. Hey, ugly, over here, they yelled, drawing the creatures' attention, leading them on a merry chase, and herding them closer together. Megumin watched, mesmerized. It was tactical genius. He wasn't just a brute force fighter. He was a one-man army. He was creating the perfect opening for her. Now, Naruto's voice commanded, her heart pounding with excitement, Megumin began her chant. Dark, ness blacker than black and darker than dark, I beseech thee, combine with my deep crimson. As she chanted, the clones expertly dodged tongues and stomps, keeping the toads perfectly grouped. An ultimate destructive force to fell all who stand in my way. Explosion. A torrent of magical energy shot from her staff, converging on the toads. The resulting blast was immense, shaking the very ground and sending a mushroom cloud of fire and displaced earth into the sky. It was, as she'd advertised, total annihilation. When the smoke cleared, there was a massive, smoking crater where the toads had been. And lying face down on the ground, completely immobile, was Megumin. Naruto walked over and nudged her with his foot. She didn't move. She's just out of mana, Aqua explained, looking slightly impressed despite herself. She's like this after every cast. Completely useless. Naruto crouched down and effortlessly lifted the girl, piggybacking her. She was light as a feather. Not useless, he said, looking at the crater. A cannon isn't useless just because it needs to be reloaded. You just have to know how and when to fire it. He looked at Aqua, then at the girl on his back. God. Desu was more trouble than she was worth, and a mage who was a one-shot glass cannon. What a party. Still, as they headed back to the city, the reward money practically in their pockets, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. It was a start. To afford better gear, they decided to take on a slightly more challenging quest the next day, exterminate the goblin nest in the nearby forest. It paid significantly more. This time, they were more prepared. Goblins are weak, but they're clever and travel in packs, Naruto explained as they walked. They use ambushes and dirty tricks. Stay close and stay alert. HMPH. As if mere goblins could trouble a goddess like me. Aqua boasted. My explosion magic will vaporize their entire nest from existence. Megumin declared from Naruto's back, WH. Ere he was still carrying her from there. Warm-up, toad hunt earlier that morning. They entered the forest. The light grew dim, filtered through the thick canopy. Naruto's senses, honed by years of life or death tracking, were on high alert. He could smell the damp earth, the moss, and something else, the foul, musky scent of goblins. And there were a lot of them. Suddenly, the rustling in the bushes around them exploded into action. A horde of small, green-skinned creatures with wicked-looking knives burst from the foliage, chittering and screaming. There were at least 30 of them. Aqua shrieked. Megumin, still on Naruto's back, yelped in surprise. Before Naruto could even move to engage them, a figure in heavy, gleaming plate armor charged past them from out of nowhere. A horde of monsters. How wonderful. A beautiful, feminine voice declared from behind a full-faced helmet. It was a crusader, a high-level defensive class. She planted herself directly in the path of the goblin charge. Her massive greatsword held in a defensive stance. Come, defile me with your filthy claws. Subject my noble knight's body to your most depraved and humiliating attacks. The goblins, confused for a second, obliged. They swarmed her, their knives and clubs bouncing harmlessly off her masterfully crafted armor. She didn't even flinch, though she did let out a series of pleased, breathy moans that made Naruto's skin crawl. She's enjoying this, Aqua whispered, horrified. The crusader was a perfect tank. Her defensive skill was so high that the goblins couldn't even scratch her. But her offensive skill was, apparently, non-existent. She swung her greatsword in wide, clumsy arcs that missed every single goblin, each swing leaving her completely open. The goblins, realizing she was no threat, simply ignored her swings and continued to dogpile her. I can't hit them, she panted, a flush of what seemed to be excited frustration in her voice. My attacks are too clumsy. Oh, the humiliation. Naruto stared, a sense of profound disbelief washing over him. A goddess who was a magnet for monsters. A mage who could only cast one spell. And now, a tank who couldn't hit the broad side of a barn and was a raving masochist. This world is insane, he thought. But then, he looked again. He saw past the disturbing panting and the clumsy swings. He saw an unbreachable wall. The goblins were all focused on her. Not a single one had gotten past. She was holding them. A tactical opportunity. He gently set Megumin down. Can you cast your spell from here? Yes, but that knight is in the middle of them. Don't worry about her, Naruto said. He then raised his voice. Hey, Crusader. The woman in armor turned her head, her helmet facing him. Yes, do you wish to join them? Perhaps you have some rope. Naruto ignored the bizarre request. His voice was sharp, clear, and resonant with command. I need you to hold them. Right there, in that ravine entrance. Don't let a single one pass. Don't try to attack, just hold the line. Can you do that for me, knight? The crusader froze. The breathy, Excited quality in her voice vanished, replaced by stunned silence. He hadn't mocked her. He hadn't made a lewd comment. He had called her Knight. He had given her a clear, strategic order that utilized her greatest strength. He had given her a duty. Yes, she said, her voice suddenly firm and resolute. I will not fail. She slammed the tip of her greatsword into the ground, bracing herself. Her stance was perfect, an unshakable fortress of steel and will. The goblins swarmed, but she didn't budge an inch. Good, Naruto said. Megumin, you're up. Aqua, get ready to heal if she needs it, but I don't think she will. With the Crusader holding the entire horde in a bottleneck, Megumin had a perfect stationary target. She launched into her chant, her voice ringing with confidence. Naruto stood beside her, kunai in hand, ready to intercept any stray goblin that might break through. None did. The knight was true to her word. Megumin finished her spell. The explosion was magnificent, a focused blast of power that tore through the ravine entrance. The goblins, and the sound of their chittering, were instantly vaporized. When the smoke cleared, the Crusader was still standing, her armor blackened and smoking, but completely unharmed. She looked from the crater back to Naruto, her posture one of awe. She walked over to them, her gait now purposeful. She removed her helmet. She was a stunningly beautiful blonde woman with eyes as blue as Aqua's, her face flushed not with ecstasy, but with the thrill of a battle well fought. That was incredible, she said, her eyes fixed on Naruto. Your command, it was perfect. My name is Darkness. It is my honor to fight alongside a tactician of your caliber. Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, giving a short nod. You're a good shield. Darkness's breath hitched, a compliment on her actual, tactical utility. It was a novel and deeply affecting experience. As the newly formed, four-person party started the walk back to Axel, Darkness insisted on carrying the spent Megumin, treating the task with a solemn duty. They took a slightly different path. A shortcut Darkness knew. It was on this path that they found it. The forest here was vibrant, full of life and sound. But they came upon a clearing, a perfect circle about 50 feet in diameter. That was utterly wrong. The grass was a sickly, uniform gray. The leaves on the trees crumbled into fine dust at the slightest touch. There was no wind. There were no sounds of birds, no insects. Not even the whisper of leaves. It was a pocket of absolute silence. Aqua recoiled as if struck. What is this? This feeling. It's disgusting. It's not demonic energy. It's empty. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He stepped into the circle, and the ambient noise of the world cut off as if he'd stepped into a vacuum. He closed his eyes, entering sage mode. He reached out, trying to feel the nature energy, the life force of the world. And he found nothing. It wasn't dark energy, or negative energy. It was a hole, a void, a place where energy, where life itself, had been unwritten from existence. At the center of the circle lay the corpse of a deer. Its body wasn't decaying or rotting. It was simply fading. Its edges were indistinct, like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, slowly dissolving into the gray nothingness of the ground. Naruto felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. He had fought beings of immense power, of pure hatred, of world-breaking ambition. But this was different. This was not a presence, but an absence. It was the energy of the end. An end not of fire and death, but of silent, utter erasure. We should go, he said, his voice grim. He stepped out of the circle, and the sounds of the forest rushed back in, a welcome cacophony. Aqua was trembling slightly, looking at the gray patch with pure, instinctual horror. Darkness had her hand on the hilt of her sword, her face grim. Even the unconscious Megumin on her back seemed to stir with a shiver. They left that silent clearing behind, but the image of it, the feeling of that profound wrongness, was seared into Naruto's mind. That evening, the four of them sat around a large table at the guild, celebrating their successful quests. They had money, food, and drink. They were a bizarre collection of misfits. A useless goddess, a one-shot arch-wizard, a perverted crusader, and a shinobi from another world. They were loud, chaotic, and fundamentally dysfunctional. Aqua was trying to get him to perform his water-walking, party trick, for her new adoring fans. Megumin was excitedly explaining the philosophical nuances of her explosion, her eyes gleamy, ing with respect every time she looked at him. Darkness was watching him with a new, intense admiration, a knight who had finally found a commander worthy of her shield. Naruto looked at the three of them, at the chaos they embodied. He thought of the quiet, orderly peace he had died to achieve. He thought of the silent, gray patch in the forest. He took a long drink of his water. This life was noisy. It was messy. It was complicated. And for the first time since he'd woken up in that white room, Naruto Uzumaki felt the corners of his mouth lift in a small, genuine smile. This was better than peace. This was living. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Dullahan and the Crusaders' Vow. A fragile sense of routine had settled over the mismatched party in the week following the goblin hunt. It was a chaotic, unpredictable rhythm. But a rhythm nonetheless. Mornings began with Naruto rising before the sun, his internal clock still set to a shinobi's discipline. He'd find a quiet spot on the edge of town to practice his katas and meditate, centering himself in the flow of this world's natural energy. It was weaker here, less vibrant than at home, but it was pure, untainted by the lingering chakra of past wars. It was soothing. He would return to the inn to find Aqua still asleep, likely dreaming of adoring followers and high-proof liquor. Megumin would be awake, eagerly poring over maps of the surrounding area, looking for abandoned quarries or desolate plains suitable for her daily art installation. Darkness, already clad in her impeccably polished armor, would be doing stretches. She looked suspiciously like she was trying to dislocate her own shoulder, muttering about preparing her body for the rigors of the day. They had money now, enough to be comfortable. They ate well, and Naruto had even managed to convince Darkness to invest in a slightly better quality greatsword, one with better balance, arguing that a missed swing was a tactical liability. She'd agreed, though she'd pouted about her old, clumsy sword being more humiliatingly ineffective. Naruto found himself in the strange position of being a fusion of team captain, exasperated father, and strategic mastermind. He coordinated their daily quests, simple extermination missions that paid for their upkeep and allowed Megumin to get her daily explosion out of her system. He'd then piggyback her home while Aqua complained about the mud and Darkness lamented the lack of truly fearsome beasts that could trample her properly. It was, in a word, insane. It was also the most normal life he had ever known. There were no elders to report to, no international incidents to diffuse, no ancient prophecies hanging over his head. There was just the next quest, the next meal, and the next baffling interaction with his companions. They were in the guild hall now, celebrating another successful, albeit messy, giant bat extermination. Megumin was flushed with pride. Aqua was performing a water purification trick foe. Ra's small crowd of slack-jawed rookie adventurers, and Darkness was scanning the higher-level quest board with a hopeful, slightly disturbing gleam in her eyes. Ah, Naruto, there's a quest to subjugate a griffin. Imagine its sharp talons tearing at my armor, she said, her voice breathy. Naruto, sipping a mug of water, just shook his head. We don't have the aerial mobility to handle a griffin efficiently. The risk-reward isn't there. Quote, but the risk is the reward. Before he could formulate a reply to that particular brand of logic, a sudden, unnatural chill swept through the guild hall. The cheerful din of conversation died instantly. The flames in the hearth pit flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Outside, the bright afternoon sun seemed to dim, as if a cloud had passed over it, but this felt colder, more deliberate. The main doors of the guild creaked open slowly. A figure stood silhouetted against the muted light. It was tall and broad, clad in gleaming, jet-black armor that seemed to drink the very light from the air. It carried no sword, no weapon of any kind. But the most terrifying feature was the fact that it had no head. Where a neck should be, there was only a clean cut, from which a faint violet flame flickered like a malevolent candle. The figure held its horned helmet under one arm, and from within that helmet, 2 points of crimson light burned with cold, intelligent fury. It took a single, heavy step into the guild hall, the sound of its armored boot like a death knell. A low, resonant voice, seeming to emanate from the helmet itself, echoed through the terrified silence. My name is Beldia. I am one of the Demon King's generals. And I have come to this town for one reason. No one moved. The adventurers, who minutes before had been boasting of their prowess, were frozen in place, their faces pale with terror. Luna, The guild receptionist looked as if she were about to faint. Beldia's glowing red eyes scanned the room, seeming to pierce every soul. For several days now, some fool has been firing explosion magic at my castle. An act of profound disrespect. Every single day, without fail, a part of my home is blown to smithereens. I have been patient. I have tolerated it, but my patience has run its course. His gaze settled on a random adventurer near the front, a silver-haired thief girl who looked particularly terrified. I have placed a death curse upon this town. In 1 week, everyone here will die. Unless, he paused, the silence stretching into an eternity, the one responsible for the explosion magic presents themselves to me. Step forward now, and I will lift the curse. Megumin, standing beside Naruto, went rigid. Her face, usually so full of dramatic pride, was ashen. She took a small, involuntary step forward, her body trembling. Naruto's hand shot out, not grabbing her, but resting gently on her shoulder. A silent, firm anchor. She stopped, looking up at him with wide, frightened eyes. The headless knight, Beldia, seemed to notice the slight movement. His crimson gaze snapped to their table. If the culprit does not come forward, I will return. And I will see to it that your deaths are not swift. With that, he turned, his black cape swirling, and strode out of the guild, vanishing as abruptly as he had appeared. For a moment, the world remained frozen. Then, chaos erupted. A death curse. We're all going to die. It's that crazy crimson demon girl. It has to be. Someone hand her over. I don't want to die because of her stupid spell. The adventurers, their fear curdling into anger, started to turn on Megumin. A large, brutish swordsman started to stomp towards her, his hand on his hilt. Naruto moved. He didn't say a word. He simply stepped in front of Megumin, placing himself between her and the angry mob. He didn't draw a weapon. He didn't flare his power. He just stood there, his blue eyes calm and impossibly cold. The sheer, unshakable confidence radiating from him was a physical force. The approaching swordsman slowed, then stopped, suddenly uncertain. The angry shouts died down to nervous muttering. He's a Demon King's general, Naruto said, his voice cutting through the tension. You think giving him what he wants is the end of it? You think he'll just politely pack up and leave? He's a monster. This is just an excuse to slaughter everyone here. His logic was simple, direct, and undeniable. The adventurers exchanged uneasy glances. He was right. So what do we do? Someone called out from the back. He's a general. None of us can fight him. We'll handle it, Naruto said. We, encompassing the 3 girls standing behind him. Aqua, for once, didn't make a boastful claim. She simply squared her shoulders, a faint blue aura flickering around her hands. Darkness. Stepped forward to stand beside Naruto, her hand resting on the pommel of her greatsword, her face a grim mask of determination. Megumin, though still shaken, straightened up, clutching her staff like a lifeline. In that moment, they looked less like a band of misfits and more like the heroes the town desperately needed. The crowd, seeing their united front, backed down, their anger replaced by a fragile, desperate hope. Naruto led his party to a corner table, away from the prying eyes and ears. This is all my fault, Megumin whispered, her head bowed. I should turn myself in. No, Naruto said firmly. You won't. We're a party. Your problem is our problem. Besides, he added, a flicker of a grin on his face, I've never let my friends take the fall for something, and I'm not about to start now. Megumin looked up, tears welling in her eye. So, what's the plan, Naruto? Aqua asked, her voice unusually serious. Do we just wait for him to come back? Never wait for your enemy to make the first move, Naruto replied. His mind already working, sifting through strategies from 100 different battles. He gave us a week. We're going to use it. First, we need intel. A Dullahan, a headless knight, he's an undead. Aqua, your holy magic will be effective against him and any forces he brings. Aqua nodded, a flicker of her usual pride returning. Of course, my divine power is the bane of all undead. He's also a general, Naruto continued, his gaze becoming distant. That means he has a base, soldiers, a command structure. Megumin, your explosions weren't just annoying him, they were hitting his castle. That's our target. So I just blow it up again? Megumin asked, her hope rekindled. No, Naruto said, shaking his head. A general who can function without a head attached is probably immune to simple decapitation. Blowing up his castle might just make him angrier. We need to know what we're walking into. His location, his forces, the terrain. Everything. He looked at the three of them. His expression serious. We're going on the offensive. But we're going to do it smart. He stood up, making a single hand sign. I'll handle the reconnaissance. With a dozen soft puffs, the guild hall was suddenly filled with identical copies of Naruto Uzumaki. The clones looked at the original, nodded in unison, and then vanished in blurs of orange, slipping out of Guild Hall unnoticed in the lingering chaos. They were fanning out, heading towards the direction Megumin had been firing her spells. Aqua, Megumin, and Darkness stared at the empty spaces where the clones had been, their minds struggling to process the sheer utility of such an ability. He wasn't just a powerful fighter. He was an intelligence agency unto himself. The next few hours were spent in tense preparation. Aqua stocked up on holy water. Megumin practiced the incantation for her spell, trying to find ways to shorten the casting time, even by a few seconds. Darkness sharpened her new sword. The rhythmic scrape of whetstone on steel, a strangely calming sound in the anxious town. Naruto sat at a table, a large, crude map drawn in charcoal on a piece of parchment. One by one, his clones returned, dispelling themselves and feeding their memories directly to him. The map began to fill with detail. The castle is about a day's march from here, he announced, his eyes closed in concentration as information flooded his mind. It's old, partially ruined. Sits in a valley surrounded by a dead forest. The main approach is a narrow path, easily defended. He made a mark on the map. He has an army. Skeletons, zombies, low-level undead, but there are hundreds of them. They patrol the forest in squads of 20. He opened his eyes, his gaze sharp. Beldia himself doesn't stay in the castle. He's set up a forward camp in a clearing about 3 miles from the town gates. He's waiting there, alone. Alone? Darkness asked, her interest piqued. An ambush? No. Arrogance, Naruto corrected. He's a general. He thinks no one in this town would dare to challenge him directly. He's just sitting there, waiting for the week to be up. Then let's go, Megumin urged, slamming her staff on the floor. I will smite him with my explosion. And what if you miss? Naruto countered calmly. What if his armor protects him? You get one shot, Megumin. After that, you're defenseless. And the three of us have to fight a Demon King's general who is now very, very angry. We can't afford to gamble the whole fight on a single spell. Megumin deflated, but she saw his point. His logic was unassailable. Naruto's gaze then shifted to Darkness. She was practically vibrating with anticipation, a strange mix of knightly duty and her own personal brand of excitement. He could see it in the way she gripped her sword, the way her eyes darted towards the town gates. She wanted to be on the front lines, to face the Dullahan's wrath head-on, to be subjected to his curse. He sighed. He needed her, but not like that. He needed the knight, not the masochist. He stood up and gestured for her to follow him. Darkness, a word. He led her out of the noisy guild and onto the town's outer wall. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The fields beyond the wall were empty, the farmers having long since fled into the relative safety of the town. The hot of facing his death curse excites you, doesn't it? Naruto asked, his voice soft, not accusatory. Darkness flinched, as if he had read her darkest secret. A deep blush crept up her neck. A knight's duty is to face danger. To stand as a shield for the people, no matter the personal cost. That's part of it, Naruto acknowledged. But you're also hoping he chains you up and uses you as a target, aren't you? She couldn't meet his eyes, her gaze fixed on the pommel of her sword. Her silence was all the answer he needed. Naruto stepped closer, and the intensity in his presence made her look up. His eyes were not filled with judgment or disgust, but with a surprising seriousness, a profound gravity that commanded her full attention. Lalatina, he said. The name hit her like a physical blow. No one called her that. It was the name of the noble daughter, the dustiness heir, a name she tried to leave behind whenever she donned her armor. To hear it from him, in this moment, it stripped away her facade. leaving her feeling completely exposed. I don't care about your fantasies, he said, his voice low and firm. Not right now. Right now, I'm not talking to Darkness, the masochistic crusader. I'm talking to Lolatina Dustiness, the knight. Tomorrow, when he attacks, he's going to send his army of the dead at that gate first. The town guard will break. The adventurers will run. It will be a slaughter. He held her gaze, and she found she couldn't look away. I need a shield, not a target, not a martyr. I need an unbreakable wall. I need you to stand before the city gates and hold that line. I need you to ensure that not a single one of those things touches the people you've sworn to protect. Can you do that for me? His words wrapped around her heart. He wasn't indulging her. He wasn't mocking her. He was giving her a mission. A sacred trust. He was appealing to the very core of her being, the noble vow she had taken, the reason she had become a crusader in the first place. He saw the knight beneath the perversion. He saw her value. A powerful, unfamiliar emotion swelled in her chest. It wasn't the thrill of anticipated pain. It was honor, purpose. Her back straightened. The blush on her cheeks faded, replaced by a look of fierce determination. Her hand, which had been fidgeting with her sword, now gripped it with unshakable resolve. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong, devoid of any of its usual breathlessness. I will hold the line. I swear it on my name. Naruto nodded, a faint smile on his lips. I know you will. The next day dawned gray and ominous. Beldia did not wait the full week. Just as Naruto predicted, his arrogance and the whispers of that strange, silent power had driven him to act. A horn blast, deep and mournful, echoed from the forest. Soon after, they appeared, a shambling, endless horde of skeletons and zombies, marching slowly but inexorably toward the main gate of Axel. Panic erupted, but this time, there was a plan. Darkness stood alone before the gate, her greatsword planted in the earth before her, a solitary bastion of steel against the tide of death. The town guards, emboldened by her presence and Naruto's clear instructions, manned the walls with bows and spears, their fear held at bay by a fragile thread of discipline. Remember the plan, Naruto said to Aqua and Megumin, who stood with him on the wall. Darkness holds them. Aqua, you're on crowd control. Use your holy magic to thin their numbers, create barriers. Megumin, you wait for my signal. Do not fire until Beldia himself shows up. The undead horde reached the gate and crashed against the unmoving form of Lolatina Dustiness. She held. Bones crunched against her armor. Skeletal hands clawed at her, their attacks pinging harmlessly off the blessed steel. Zombies swarmed, trying to pull her down. She grunted with effort, her feet digging into the dirt, but she did not give a single inch. Her face was a mask of grim focus, her eyes burning with the light of her purpose. This was not a perverted fantasy, this was the fulfillment of her vow. Aqua, now, Naruto commanded. Aqua, her face set with concentration, raised her hands. Sacred create water. A deluge of shimmering, holy water erupted from the sky, drenching the front ranks of the undead. The effect was instantaneous. The skeletons and zombies sizzled and dissolved, screaming silent curses as their unholy forms were purified. Aqua didn't stop, creating waves and barriers of holy light that decimated the enemy forces. For the first time, her power felt not like a party trick, but like the divine weapon it was meant to be. Naruto moved along the walls, a blur of motion. A shadow clone would appear, drag a wounded guard to safety, and dispel. Another would relay orders to the archers, pointing out priority targets. He was the nerve center of the entire defense, his presence everywhere at once. The battle raged, but the line held. Darkness was immovable. Aqua's holy magic was relentless. But they were only thinning the horde. It was a battle of attrition they would eventually lose. Then, he appeared. Beldia, riding a nightmare of a horse with glowing eyes, trotted out of the forest. He surveyed the scene, his headless gaze fixing on the lone knight holding back his entire army, and the goddess raining down purification from the walls. So, the heroes of this backwater town have some fight in them, his voice boomed. Impressive, but futile. Megumin, Naruto said softly. Target him. Get ready. Beldia raised a hand, and a wave of dark energy shot towards Darkness. Declaration of death. But before the curse could hit, Naruto was there. He had moved from the wall to the field in the space of a heartbeat, appearing directly in front of darkness. He held out a hand. A swirl of golden chakra flaring to life. The death curse hit the chakra shield and dissipated harmlessly. Beldia's crimson eyes widened in their helmet. "What? My turn," Naruto said. With a series of hand signs, 20 shadow clones appeared, fanning out around Beldia. They didn't charge recklessly. They moved with purpose, kunai glinting, harrying his mount and testing his defenses. Beldia roared in frustration, his massive sword appearing in his hand. He was a whirlwind of black steel, cleaving through the clones, but for every one he destroyed, 2 more would take its place. Their attacks relentless and perfectly coordinated. He was powerful, but he was being overwhelmed by sheer numbers and superior tactics. He finally saw an opening, batting away. 2 clones and charging directly at the original Naruto. "You will die," he roared. Naruto met his charge. He didn't need clones for this. He entered Sage mode, the orange pigments flaring around his eyes. Beldia's powerful, telegraphed swing, which would have crushed any normal adventurer, seemed to move in slow motion. Naruto sidestepped it with ease, the wind from the blade ruffling his jacket. He spun, his body low to the ground, and slammed a palm into the leg of Beldia's undead steed. A small, controlled Rasengan discharged, and the horse dissolved into purple smoke and dust. Beldia landed on his feet, stumbling. He had lost his mount and his momentum. He was now on the ground, facing a foe who was faster, stronger, and could seemingly predict his every move. The duel was over before it had truly begun. Naruto appeared behind him, the cool edge of a kunai pressed against the spot where Beldia's neck met his armor. "It's over, General. Call off your army. Surrender." For a moment, Beldia was still. The Headless Knight, a feared general of the Demon King, had been so utterly and completely defeated. Humiliation warred with rage, and from the depths of that rage, the whispers he'd been hearing grew louder. The promise of silence, the end of this noisy, infuriating world. His rage boiled over. "Never," he bellowed. A cataclysmic wave of black, vile energy erupted from his body. "If I am to die, I will take you with me." Death's prophetic curse. It wasn't aimed at Naruto, but at the town behind him, at everything. It was a suicide attack. But Naruto was ready. He didn't dodge. He didn't try to block it with chakra. He slammed his palm onto his own forearm. 4 symbols seal, intricate black script, a language of power completely alien to this world, spiraled into existence on his skin. The swirling vortex of Fuinjutsu turned his arm into a maelstrom of sealing energy. The death curse, a wave of absolute annihilation, was drawn into the seal, sucked into the vortex on his arm like ink into paper. The black markings flared, then settled, leaving behind a complex, permanent tattoo that pulsed with contained power. Beldia stared, his crimson eyes wide with utter disbelief. His ultimate attack, a curse that should have wiped a city off the map, had been absorbed. "By Immortal, what are you?" The Dullahan whispered, his rage extinguished and replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He had never seen such power. Not from the Demon King. Not from anyone. He never got an answer. Sacred turn undead. A brilliant column of heavenly light slammed down from the sky, engulfing the stunned general. Aqua, seeing her moment, had unleashed her most powerful purification spell. Beldia let out one final, agonized scream as his armor dissolved and his unholy spirit was torn apart. But as he faded, his last words were not a curse, but a terrified, frantic warning that only Naruto, with his enhanced sage senses, could hear clearly. "It wasn't me." The rage, the silence whispered to me. It promised an end to the gods, futile noise. "It's coming." The perfect, peaceful void. Then, he was gone. The remaining undead, their master destroyed, crumbled to dust. The battle was over. A deafening cheer erupted from the walls of Axel. That night, the guild hall was a scene of jubilant celebration. Naruto and his party were toasted as the saviors of the city. Free drinks were flowing, and bards were already composing clumsy epics about the Sage of Axel and his Valkyries. Naruto sat quietly amidst the chaos, his mind replaying the Dullahan's final words. The perfect, peaceful void. It was the same feeling he'd gotten from that patch of dead forest. This was bigger than a demon king. This was a different kind of enemy. He was pulled fro, His thoughts by a figure approaching his table. It was Darkness, now out of her armor and in a simple, noble-looking dress. Her face was serious, her posture formal. She stopped before him, and the entire guild hall seemed to quiet down. Sensing the gravity of the moment, she looked him in the eye, her own filled with a fierce, unwavering light. And then, she did something that shocked everyone. Lalatina Dustiness, high-born noble and proud crusader, knelt on one knee before Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki, she said, her voice ringing with clarity and conviction. Today, you showed me the true meaning of being a knight. You gave me purpose. You gave me honor. I was a broken sword, and you reforged me. She drew her greatsword, holding it out to him, hilt first. I am not a worthy knight. I am flawed and weak in spirit. But I will follow you. I will be your shield. I will stand between you and any darkness this world can muster. I, Lalatina Dustiness, pledge my sword, my shield, and my life to your service. Not as a masochist to her master, she added, her voice dropping to a near whisper, thick with emotion, but as a knight to her lord. Please, allow me to serve you. The guild was silent, witnessing the sacred oath. Aqua and Megumin watched, their expressions a mix of shock and profound respect. Naruto looked down at the kneeling knight, at the sword offered to him, at the unwavering devotion in her eyes. He had wanted peace. He had wanted a simple life. But it seemed that even in this new world, people in need were drawn to him. And he would not, could not, turn them away. He reached out and placed his hand over hers on the hilt of the sword. I accept your vow, Lalatina, he said softly. Stand with me. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Crimson Village and a Kinship of Power. The victory over Beldia had transformed the party's status overnight. They were no longer the bizarre quartet of misfits who hung around the guild, they were the saviors of Axel. Their fame, however, came with a new set of complications. The townsfolk were almost too grateful. Merchants refused to let them pay for goods. The innkeeper insisted their rooms were free. Eager young adventurers followed them around, begging for training advice, which Aqua was all too happy to dispense in the form of nonsensical, divine wisdom, in exchange for offerings of food and drink. It was suffocating. So, when a letter arrived for Megumin via a magically inclined courier crow, Naruto saw it as the perfect opportunity. The letter was from her parents, written in a florid, overly dramatic script, inviting her to return home to the Crimson Demon village for a visit. My homeland calls to me, Megumin had declared, striking a pose on top of their guild hall table. It is time for you all to witness the magnificent crucible from which my power was forged. The land of crimson and shadow, where every soul is a master of advanced magic. Crimson Demon Village, Aqua said, wrinkling her nose. Ain't they all a bunch of Chunabu weirdos with strange names who only care about looking cool? It is a society of the arcane elite. Megumin retorted hotly. Let's go, Naruto said, cutting off the impending argument. The decision was immediate and final. We need to get out of Axel for a while. A journey will be good for us. Darkness, ever dutiful, immediately began planning their travel logistics, calculating rations and mapping the safest routes. Aqua, after being promised the hot springs near the village were legendary, reluctantly agreed. And Megumin was practically bursting with a mixture of pride and anxiety at the thought of introducing her powerful, competent new friends to her eccentric home. The journey itself was a revelation for the girls. Their previous travels had been short, dangerous jaunts from the safety of Axel's walls. This was a true cross-country trek, and it highlighted just how much they had come to rely on Naruto for things they'd never even considered. On the first night, when Aqua complained about the cold, Naruto didn't just start a fire. He used his chakra to subtly manipulate the earth, creating a shallow, insulated depression for them to sleep in, sheltered from the wind. He showed Megumin, who understood the theory of heat transfer from her magical studies, how to identify rocks that would hold the fire's warmth long after it died down. It was a simple survival skill. Yet to her, it was a practical application of arcane principles she'd never considered. When their water skins ran low, Aqua prepared to use a low-level, create water, spell. Naruto stopped her. Save your mana. You might need it. He then led them to a low-lying area, his sage mode senses attuned to the world around him. He pointed to a specific type of moss growing on the rocks. This only grows where there's a clean underground spring. Following the patch of moss, he found a trickle of fresh, cold water seeping from the rock face. He taught Aqua how to read the land, a skill she, as a goddess of water, should have intrinsically known but never bothered to learn. She watched him, her usual arrogance replaced by a quiet, grudging respect. They encountered monsters, of course. A pack of vicious-looking beasts that resembled oversized wolves with armored plates on their backs ambushed them one evening. Darkness immediately moved to intercept them, her shield raised. But Naruto held up a hand. Wait. He stood perfectly still as the lead beast charged, its jaws slavering. Just as it leapt, Naruto made a single, fluid motion. He plucked a handful of leaves from a nearby bush, and with a flick of his wrist, sent them flying. Infused with a razor-sharp film of wind chakra, the leaves became lethal projectiles. They struck the lead beast not in its armored back, but in its unprotected joints, the ankles, the knees, the neck. The creature collapsed in a heap, wounded and howling, its charge completely broken. The rest of the pack, seeing their alpha taken down with such contemptuous ease, faltered, then turned and fled into the forest. Darkness lowered her shield, stunned. He hadn't used a massive, powerful jutsu. He hadn't even engaged in taijutsu. He had neutralized the threat with a handful of leaves. It was a demonstration of terrifying efficiency and control. Wasting energy on small fry is inefficient, he told them, as if explaining the most obvious thing in the world. A fight avoided is a fight won. By the time a strange, jagged mountain range dominated by a single, massive peak appeared on the horizon, the dynamic of the party had fundamentally shifted. Megumin saw him as a mentor who understood the nuances of power. Aqua viewed him with a new sense of awe, his competence a constant, surprising revelation. And Darkness's Knighttly devotion was now tinged with the profound respect a soldier has for a legendary general. Their arrival at the Crimson Demon village was exactly as chaotic as Aqua had feared and Megumin had promised. The gate was guarded by two mages in dramatic cloaks who introduced themselves with long, convoluted titles and struck poses that defied gravity. The village itself was a bizarre collection of crooked, wizard tower-like houses, each adorned with blinking lights and arcane symbols. Every person they passed stopped to strike a pose and introduce themselves, their names ranging from Aru and Funifera to Dodonko and Buckwhirly. Naruto, who had grown up in a village of spies, assassins, and eccentrics, was utterly unfazed. He met each dramatic introduction with a polite nod and a calm, "I'm Naruto," which seemed to throw the Crimson Demons off more than any grandstanding would have. They met Union, Megumin's self-proclaimed rival, who immediately challenged Naruto to a duel to claim the position of alpha in Megumin's party. Naruto accepted. The duel took place in the village square and drew the entire population. Union unleashed a flurry of high-level spells, Light of Saber, Cursed Lightning, Blade of Blood. They were powerful, flashy, and expertly cast. Naruto simply dodged. He flowed around the bolts of lightning and blades of light like water, his movements economical and precise. He didn't even seem to be trying. The entire village watched, mesmerized, as their most promising young mage was rendered completely impotent. Finally, as Union panted with exhaustion, her mana nearly spent, Naruto appeared in front of her. He didn't attack. He just tapped her lightly on the forehead with 2 fingers. "You're open here, here, and here," he said, pointing to 3 different gaps in her casting stance. "Your power is impressive, but you're too focused on the spell and not on your opponent. You telegraph your every move." He had defeated her without throwing a single punch or using a single jutsu. He had won with pure, fundamental skill. Union, her face bright red, could only stare in humiliated awe. Later, they met Megumin's parents. Her father, Hyozaburo, was overly dramatic and spoke in grandiose pronouncements. Her mother, Yueyui, was sweet but perpetually flustered. They looked at Naruto, at his calm demeanor and the quiet, immense pressure of the energy he held in check, and were instantly intimidated and impressed. "So you are the one leading my daughter on her path of explosions," Hyozaburo declared. "A man of great power, I can sense it. You have he eyes of one who has gazed into the abyss." Naruto just smiled faintly. "Your daughter is very dedicated. She has a lot of potential." This simple, honest praise of their daughter's obsessive, 1T. Rack magic meant more to them than any grand statement. They approved, wholeheartedly. The peaceful, if bizarre, visit was shattered on the third day. A siren, a high-pitched magical wail, echoed through the village. Emergency. A demon king's general is attacking the village. All mages to the defensive perimeter. The Crimson Demons, for all their theatrics, were not cowards. They swarmed to the village walls. Their poses replaced by grim determination. Naruto and his party followed, arriving at the main gate to see the attacking general. It was a woman, or rather, a monstrous chimera that was once a woman. Her lower body was serpentine, her arms were mismatched, one ending in a metallic claw, the other a writhing tentacle. Her name, they would later learn, was Sylvia. But something was wrong with her. Patches of her skin were the same lifeless gray Naruto had seen in the forest. A faint, dark energy, like heat haze, shimmered around her, and it felt horribly, sickeningly familiar. It was the void. Behold, you arrogant mages, Sylvia hissed, her voice a discordant chorus. Your time is over. Your pathetic magic is nothing. The Crimson Demons didn't hesitate. They unleashed their ultimate spells. Inferno. Abyssal Vortex. Light of Saber. A coordinated barrage of high-level magic, enough to level a fortress, surged towards Sylvia. Naruto watched, his eyes narrowed. He felt it before he saw it. The spells flew, but as they neared Sylvia, they began to unravel. The roaring flames of Inferno guttered and died. The swirling dark energy of the vortex dissipated into nothing. The brilliant blade of light simply vanished a foot from her face. Her shimmering, void-touched aura acted as a perfect anti-magic field. A collective gasp of horror went through the Crimson Demons. Their greatest weapon, their very identity, was useless. Sylvia laughed, a grating, triumphant sound. You see, your noise is silenced. Now, you will know true despair. She charged, her serpentine body moving with terrifying speed. Panic began to set in among the villagers. Their pride had been shattered. They were defenseless. But Naruto was not. He watched Sylvia's charge, his mind cold and clear. Magic didn't work, but he wasn't a mage. Darkness, hold the gate. Don't let her through, he commanded. Aqua, prepare to heal the wounded. Megumin, stay back. This one is mine. His tone was absolute. No one argued. As Sylvia closed in on the gate, Naruto stepped forward to meet her. And then, he unleashed it. Not all of it, not even a fraction of what he was truly capable of, but enough. A torrent of brilliant, golden energy erupted from him, forming a flowing, fiery cloak of power. His hair spiked up, his whisker marks became thick and black, and his entire being radiated an immense, overwhelming pressure. It was the chakra of the nine tails, perfectly controlled, merged with his own. Kurama mode. The sheer force of his presence caused the air to hum and the ground to crack beneath his feet. The Crimson Demons, who prided themselves on their powerful auras, felt like flickering candles in the face of a supernova. Megumin, who had felt his power before, was still breathless at the sight of this transformation. This was the power he kept hidden. This was the true strength of the man she followed. Sylvia, who had been charging with absolute confidence, skidded to a halt. Her instincts screamed at her. The energy coming off this man wasn't magic. It was something else, something primal, powerful, and utterly anathema to the void she was bonded with. What is that power? She stammered, her triumph turning to uncertainty. Naruto didn't answer with words. He answered with action. He vanished. He reappeared directly in front of her, moving faster than her eyes could track. His fist, glowing with golden energy, slammed into her chest. The impact wasn't a magical blast. It was pure, physical force, amplified to an impossible degree. Sylvia's anti-magic aura did nothing to stop it. She was launched backwards, crashing through several of the crooked houses like a cannonball. She emerged from the rubble, screeching in rage and pain, her body already knitting itself back together. You cannot defeat me. I am fused with the power of the void. I am eternal, she shrieked. Naruto simply watched her, his golden form blazing against the twilight sky. Eternal? No, you're just a puppet, and I'm going to cut your strings. He raised his hand. The golden chakra began to swirl and condense, but it wasn't forming a Rasengan. It was gathering the wind itself, shaping it. honing it into a sound that terrified everyone who heard it, a high-pitched, piercing shriek, like 1,000 blades grinding together. A miniature, four-pointed star of wind and chakra spun to life in his palm. A Resenshuriken. The sight of it stole the breath from every crimson demon. They were masters of destructive magic, but this felt different. This felt like a fundamental law of nature being weaponized. It was beautiful and utterly horrifying. Megumin stared at it, her single red eye wide with awe and a dawning realization. This was what she had been striving for her entire life. A single, perfect, ultimate spell. And he had just created it in his hand as if it were nothing. "What is that?" Sylvia whispered, a tremor of real fear in her voice. The void energy within her was recoiling, shrinking away from the sheer, vibrant life and destructive potential of the technique. Naruto didn't give her a grand speech. He simply drew his arm back and threw it. The Resenshuriken shot across the village square, not with the speed of an arrow, but with a deliberate, relentless pace. It screamed as it flew, and the very air around it seemed to tear apart. Sylvia tried to dodge, but it was too late. It struck her center mass. There was no grand explosion of fire and light. There was only a deafening roar of wind and a sphere of white light that expanded rapidly, engulfing Sylvia completely. Inside the sphere, on a microscopic level, trillions of wind blades were slicing her apart, severing not just her physical form, but the bonds of her cells, the very energy that held her together. When the light faded, Sylvia was gone. Not even dust remained. But that wasn't the most shocking part. Where she had been standing, there was now a perfectly hemispherical crater, 20 meters wide. And within that crater, the fabric of magic itself had been shredded. The air felt thin, empty, and for a full minute, no crimson demon could even muster a spark of mana. His attack hadn't just destroyed the enemy. It had temporarily annihilated the very source of their power in that location. Silence. Naruto stood there, his golden cloak receding, his expression calm. He had won. The silence was broken by a single, slow clap. It was Hyozaburo, Megumin's father. Soon, the entire village joined in, not with the boisterous cheers of victory, but with the quiet, profound applause of a people who had just witnessed something far beyond their comprehension. They were not cheering a warrior. They were paying homage to a force of nature. As Sylvia's body had disintegrated, Naruto's sage senses had caught her final whispered thought, a message not of her own volition, but from the power that animated her. It wasn't for him. It was a report, sent back to its master. Report. Anomaly encountered. Mortal wielding creator level energy. Threat level. Absolute. Recommend direct intervention from the apostle. Objective failed. The noise persists. The message faded, and Naruto knew. The being called Malachor now knew exactly who and what he was. The prelude was over. That night, the victory celebration was a subdued affair. The Crimson Demons were too awestruck to be their usual boisterous selves. They treated Naruto with a quiet, fearful reverence. He found Megumin sitting on the edge of the crater his Resenshuriken had created, staring into its smooth, glassy depths. She didn't look at him as he approached. Her gaze fixed on the proof of his power. "I always thought I was special," she said softly, her voice devoid of its usual theatrics. "Because I chose the path of explosion. I gave up everything else. All other magic, just to master one perfect spell. I thought it made me unique. Strong." She finally turned to look at him, her one visible eye shimmering with unshed tears. "But I was just playing. I chant for a full minute to make a big bang. You held the end of the world in your hand. And you threw it like it was a stone." Naruto sat down next to her on the crater's edge. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He didn't tell her she was strong too. He gave her something far more valuable, the truth. "Power like this isn't a gift, Megumin," he said, his voice quiet. "It's a burden. It's lonely, to have the strength to end any fight, but to have to hold back, every second of every day, so you don't accidentally shatter the world around you." He looked at his own hand, clenching it into a fist. To know that one mistake, one moment of lost control, could hurt the people you care about, it's a heavy price to pay. He looked at her, and for the first time, he let her see past the competent leader and the unflappable hero. He let her see the weariness in his eyes, the echo of the solitary boy who was feared for the power he held. Megumin's eyes widened. He wasn't boasting. He was confiding in her. He saw her as an equal, someone who could understand, even a little, the loneliness at the peak. She wasn't just his artillery piece, or weird kid he was looking after. He was acknowledging their kinship. A kinship of overwhelming, world-breaking power. She didn't know what to say. So, she did the only thing that felt right. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a small, trusting gesture. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "You have us." Naruto was still for a moment, surprised by the gesture. Then, a small, genuine smile touched his lips. He rested his head lightly against hers. They sat there in comfortable silence, two souls who wielded devastating power, finding a moment of quiet understanding under the stars of a strange new world. The bond between them, forged in the fires of her explosion and the screaming wind of his Rasenshuriken, was now unbreakable. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Cursed Water and a Goddess's Faith. The journey back from the Crimson Demon Village was marked by a new, unspoken dynamic. Megumin was quieter, her dramatic posturing replaced by a watchful intensity. She studied Naruto's every move, not like a fan, but like a dedicated student trying to comprehend the master's art. Darkness's devotion had deepened into something akin to zealous faith. She saw his every decision not just as tactically sound, but as morally absolute. And then there was Aqua. She had witnessed Naruto's Kurama mode transformation, had felt the ground-shaking power of his Rasenshuriken. Her entire worldview, which placed gods at the pinnacle of power and mortals far below, had been irrevocably fractured. Her usual boasts about her own divinity now sounded hollow even to her own ears. For most of the trip, she was sullen and withdrawn, grappling with the cognitive dissonance of being a goddess who was so thoroughly outclassed by her human subordinate. Her mood only brightened when she remembered their next destination. Alcanratia, she declared, her old sparkle returning as the city came into view. The city of water, hot springs, and my most devoted followers. Prepare to be amazed, everyone. You're about to see how a real goddess is treated. There will be parades, feasts, an endless supply of adoring Axis cultists ready to cater to my every whim. Alcanratia was, as advertised, a beautiful city. Canals of sparkling clear water crisscrossed the streets instead of roads, and the air was filled with the gentle scent of steam from the numerous hot springs. It was known as a resort town, a place of healing and relaxation. All thanks to the holy properties of its water that was a direct manifestation of Aqua's divine domain. But as their gondola glided into the city proper, it was immediately clear that something was terribly wrong. The water in the canals, which should have been crystal clear, was sluggish and murky, with a faint, oily sheen on its surface. The cheerful atmosphere Aqua had described was absent, replaced by a pall of listlessness and lethargy. The citizens who lined the streets looked pale and sickly, their movements slow, their faces etched with a deep, spiritual exhaustion. Priests in the blue and white robes of the Axis cult were performing frantic, theatrical prayers by the water's edge, but their spells fizzled with barely a flicker of light. Aqua's triumphant smile faltered, then collapsed entirely. What is this? My water, it's tainted." She dipped her hand into the canal. The water felt cold and dead. She tried to cast a simple purification spell, a cantrip she could normally do in her sleep. Purification. A faint, pathetic blue shimmer flickered over her fingers and died. The water remained unchanged. She tried again, shouting the word, pouring more of her energy into it. "Nothing. It's not working," she whispered, her voice trembling. "My magic, it's not working here." Naruto knelt beside the canal, his expression grim. He didn't need to dip his hand in. He could feel it, the same chilling, profound wrongness from the silent clearing in the forest near Axel. The same void energy that had been woven into the General Sylvia. It wasn't a demonic curse or a poison that could be purged. It was an unmaking. It was draining the very divinity from the water, leaving behind a hollow, lifeless shell. "This is his work," Naruto said, his voice low. "Malachors." A crowd of citizens noticed Aqua's distinctive blue hair and celestial raiment. "It's the goddess Aqua," someone cried, their voice weak but hopeful. "She's returned." They swarmed her, not with the adoration she craved, but with desperate, grasping pleas. "Lady Aqua, please help us. The water is cursed. Our healing spells do nothing. We are sick. The springs that should heal us only make us weaker." Please, save us. Aqua was surrounded, overwhelmed. She was their goddess, the source of their faith and the city's prosperity. They were looking to her for a miracle, and she was utterly, humiliatingly powerless. The weight of their expectation, combined with her own sudden impotence, was a crushing blow. I can't, she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. I don't know what's wrong. Her confession was a spark in a powder keg. Their hope curdled into angry despair. She can't help us. A useless goddess. We've been praying to her for nothing. She's abandoned us. The accusations, the same insults she'd shrugged off from Kazuma and others, now hit her with the force of physical blows. These were her people, her most faithful followers, and she had failed them. She broke. With a choked sob, she pushed her way through the crowd and fled, running blindly down the street. Aqua, Megumin and Darkness cried out, moving to follow her. Let her go, Naruto said, his voice firm. You two, find the local Axis cult headquarters. Talk to the head priest. Gather information. Find out when this started and how. I'll find Aqua. Darken. S and Megumin exchanged a worried glance, but they trusted his judgment. They nodded and headed off, leaving Naruto alone by the side of the dead canal. He closed his eyes, extending his senses. Finding a panicked, crying goddess in a city this size would be difficult for anyone else. For a sage, it was simple. He could feel the unique, flickering signature of her divine energy, a beacon of distress in the sickened city. He found her huddled in a forgotten back alley, curled up behind a stack of empty barrels, weeping inconsolably. Her usual divine aura was gone, leaving her looking small, mortal, and profoundly broken. They hate me, she sobbed, not even looking up as he approached. They're right. They're all right. I'm a useless goddess. I can't even purify my own water. I can't do anything. Naruto didn't offer empty reassurances. He didn't tell her it wasn't her fault. He sat down on an old crate across from her, his presence a calm, steady anchor in her storm of despair. When I was a kid, he began. His voice quiet, I had a monster sealed inside me. A beast of pure chakra and hatred. Everyone in my village knew it. They were terrified of me. They looked at me with fear and disgust. They called me a demon. A monster. They whispered that I should never have been born. Aqua stopped crying, her head lifting slightly. She looked at him, her puffy eyes wide with surprise. He never spoke of his past. I tried to get their attention by pulling pranks, being loud, acting like a fool, he continued, a faint, wry smile on his face. I thought if I could just make them look at me, even if it was with anger. It would be better than being invisible. Better than the hatred. It never worked. It just made them hate me more. He met her gaze, his blue eyes holding a deep, resonant empathy. I know what it feels like to be hated by the people you're supposed to protect. I know what it feels like to be seen as a failure, a liability. But you know what I learned. Aqua just shook her head, mesmerized by his confession. I learned that their words don't define you, Naruto said, his voice hardening with conviction. Their fear, their anger, that's their problem. Your worth isn't determined by their approval. It's determined by what you do. By your actions. You can sit here and cry and prove them all right. Or you can get up, get angry, and fight for your city and your people. You can show them what a goddess does when her domain is threatened. He stood up, towering over her. I'm not leaving you behind to cry in an alley, Aqua. I'm going to find the source of his corruption, and I'm going to destroy it. And you're coming with me. Because I need your help. You are the goddess of water. You know this city, this element, better than anyone. I can't do this without you. His words struck her like a bolt of lightning. He wasn't coddling her. He wasn't pitying her. He was challenging her. More than that, he was telling her he needed her. He, the man who could destroy a demon king's general with a handful of leaves, who wielded power that could tear the fabric of reality, was saying that he, in this moment, needed a useless goddess. It was the most profound expression of faith anyone had ever shown her. Slowly, shakily, she got to her feet. The tears were gone, replaced by a flickering, unfamiliar spark of determination. You really think I can help? I don't think, Naruto said, his voice unwavering. I know. He gave her a moment, then his tone shifted back to business. Now, tell me, where does the city's water originate? The ultimate source. Aqua blinked, her mind shifting gears from despair to her own domain. The Holy Spring. It's deep beneath the Grand Cathedral, at the city's center. It's the nexus of my divine power in this region. The spring itself is a direct conduit to the elemental plane of water. Then that's where we'll find our answer, Naruto said. And that's where we're going to make our stand. Megumin and Darkness found them at the entrance to the Grand Cathedral of the Axis cult. The place was in chaos, priests running around in a panic, their prayers failing, their holy relics inert. The head priest, a man with a wild look in his eyes, was trying to sell them holy soap as a last-ditch cure. Naruto, we found out it started 3 days ago, Darkness reported, ignoring the frantic priests. A tremor was felt deep underground. And then the water started to go bad, starting from the cathedral and spreading outwards. Just as I thought, Naruto said. The corruption is coming from the source. We're going underground. He strode into the cathedral, his presence silencing the chaos. He didn't ask for permission. He walked with the authority of someone who had already made his decision. Show me the way to the Holy Spring. The head priest, recognizing the same overwhelming power he'd felt from Aqua in her prime, could only nod dumbly and led them to a hidden staircase behind the main altar. The descent was long and deep, spiraling into the bedrock beneath the city. The air grew cold, and the faint void-tainted energy grew stronger with every step. The walls of the stone passage, which should have been weeping with holy water, were bone-dry and coated in the same sickly gray dust. They emerged into a vast, natural cavern. In the center was a large, circular pool of water that should have been glowing with a soft, divine light. Instead, it was a pit of utter blackness, a pool of liquid night that seemed to absorb the light from their torches. And in the very center of the pool, half submerged, was a pulsating, crystalline structure. A void anchor, Naruto surmised, leeching the life from the water. But it was not unguarded. A figure rose from the black water before the anchor. It had no face, no distinct features, just a vaguely humanoid shape made of shimmering, solidified silence. It was like looking at a hole in reality. Its presence was a physical weight, a press. That sought to unmake everything around it. It immediately fixed its non-existent gaze on Aqua. A choralist, Naruto breathed, recognizing the name from Kurama's vast well of knowledge, memories from the Sage of Six Paths himself. A conceptual being, an anti-god weapon. Its entire purpose is to nullify and erase divine energy. The moment the choralist focused on her, Aqua cried out in pain, clutching her chest. Her divine energy, already weakened, was being actively drained, siphoned away by the creature's mere proximity. She stumbled, her legs giving out. It's feeding on her, Megumin shouted. Darkness, Megumin, protect Aqua. Don't let it get near her. Naruto commanded as he shot forward, a Rasengan already forming in his hand. He moved across the cavern floor like a golden comet, but as he approached the choralist, his Rasengan flickered. The void aura around the creature was actively trying to pull his technique apart, to unwrite the chakra that formed it. He had to pour or power into it just to keep it stable. He slammed the sphere into the creature's chest. The impact threw it back, but it didn't dissolve or explode. The Rasengan's energy simply vanished into it, as if poured into a bottomless hole. The choralist was undamaged. This was not a fight he could win with raw power. The choralist wasn't a physical being. It was a living embodiment of the void's core principle, negation. The creature reformed, its silent attention now split between the draining Aqua and the threat of Naruto. It sent a wave of pure nothingness towards him. It wasn't an attack, it was an attempt at erasure. Naruto met the wave head-on, his own Six Paths Sage mode flaring. His vibrant, golden life energy clashed with the absolute emptiness of the void. It was an ideological battle made manifest. Being versus nothingness, light versus silence. He held his ground, but it was taking a massive amount of concentration. He couldn't keep this up and fight at the same time. He looked back at his party. Darkness had formed a shield wall in front of a weakening Aqua, her armor groaning under the passive pressure of the void. Megumin stood ready, but her explosion magic would be useless against a creature that could unravel spells before they even formed. It was all up to Aqua. She was the key. She was huddled on the ground, pale and trembling, the sounds of her city's despair echoing in her mind. Useless. She abandoned us. I can't do anything. Aqua. Naruto's voice roared through the cavern, cutting through her fear. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Stop acting like a victim. She flinched, her eyes snapping to him. He was holding back a wave of pure oblivion, his face strained with effort, and he was still focused on her. It's feeding on your fear. It's feeding on your despair. That's its weapon, he yelled, his voice ringing with power and an unwavering belief she could not comprehend. You told me you were a goddess. Well, stop crying about it and remember what that means. This is your domain. This is your water. Take it back. His words, his absolute, unconditional faith in her, hit her harder than any insult ever could. He wasn't asking her to be a powerhouse like him. He was asking her to be herself. A goddess. Something inside her clicked. The despair, the fear, the humiliation, it was all washed away by a sudden, surging wave of divine indignation. How dare this thing defile her sacred spring? How dare it poison her people? How dare it make her feel useless? She got to her feet, her eyes blazing with a celestial blue light she had wielded since her time in the heavens. She looked at the chore list, not with fear, but with righteous fury. Naruto was right, she couldn't fight it with power against power. That was like trying to punch a hole. But she didn't have to. She closed her eyes, remembering Naruto's lessons on the journey. Reading the flow of water. Understanding its nature. She reached out, not with her fists, but with her very essence as a deity of water. She didn't try to purify the chore list. She focused on the water around it. The dead, black, void-tainted water. This water is mine, she whispered, her voice resonating with divine authority. She began to chant, not a spell of attack, but a hymn of reclamation. She wasn't forcing her power onto the world, she was reasserting a fundamental truth. She was reminding the water what it was. Slowly, at the edges of the pool, the blackness began to recede. A soft blue glow started to emanate from the depths. Pure, holy water, sanctified by her very presence, began to push back against the corruption. The chore list, its foundation now being eroded, let out a silent scream. Its battleground was being turned against it. The void was being pushed out by the simple, undeniable assertion of reality. Seeing his chance, Naruto changed his tactics. He stopped pushing against the void wave and instead began to shape his own energy. He formed a new Rasengan, but this one was different. He funneled pure life energy, the essence of Sage Mode, into it. It wasn't a weapon of destruction, but of creation. The chore list, weakened by Aqua's reclamation of the spring, turned its full attention back to her, trying to snuff out the source of its trouble. It lunged, but Naruto was faster. He appeared between them, his new Rasengan held high. This ends now. He didn't strike the creature. He slammed the sphere of pure life force directly into the void anchor behind it. The effect was cataclysmic. The clash between absolute creation and absolute negation was not an explosion. It was a paradox that tore itself apart. The crystal anchor cracked, shattered, and then imploded, taking the chore list with it. The wave of void energy vanished. For a moment, silence. Then, with a great roar, the holy spring erupted. A geyser of brilliant, glowing, utterly pure holy water shot into the air, washing over the cavern, cleansing the last vestiges of the gray corruption. The cavern was filled with a warm, divine light. The city was saved. Aqua stood there, panting, drained but triumphant, watching the water she had reclaimed. She had done it. She had actually done it. She turned to look at Naruto. He stood there, giving her a small, proud smile. He hadn't saved the day for her. He had given her the strength to save it herself. He hadn't seen a useless goddess. He had seen a goddess who had forgotten her own worth. Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness or despair. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and a deeper emotion she didn't yet have a name for. With a cry that was half sob, half cheer, she launched herself at him, tackling him in a hug that sent them both splashing into the newly purified spring. You did it. No, I did it. We did it, she yelled, clinging to him like a limpet, her divine energy, now stronger than ever, soaking into him. You believed in me. You actually believed in me when I didn't. Naruto, caught off guard by the hug, simply patted her on the back, a genuine smile on his face as Megumin and Darkness cheered from the cavern's edge. Her love for him, which had started as a childish crush on a powerful being, was now something far deeper. It was the absolute, unconditional devotion of a goddess to the one mortal who had looked upon her at her lowest and shown her not pity, but faith. He had not just saved her city. He had restored her divinity. And in doing so, he had earned her eternal, unwavering heart. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Royal Summons and the Price of Nobility. Their return to Axel was short-lived. They were heroes once more, this time for saving the entire region's tourism and religious economy. Aqua was insufferable, demanding non-stop praise and hosting, blessing ceremonies that were thinly veiled parties. But beneath the bragging, she carried herself with a new, quiet confidence. She had faced her own despair and won. Their fame, however, had spread far beyond the provincial towns they frequented. It had reached the one place Naruto had hoped to avoid, the royal capital. A royal envoy, clad in the pristine silver and blue of the kingdom's elite guard, arrived in Axel bearing a summons. It was a formal invitation, written on expensive parchment and sealed with the king's own crest. His Majesty, having heard tales of their exploits, the vanquishing of T.W.O. Demon King generals and the purification of Alcanradia, wished to commend them personally. Aqua was ecstatic. The king, he wants to meet me. Of course he does. He probably wants to make the Axis cult the official state religion. Megumin was intrigued by the thought of seeing the Royal Magic Academy. Naruto, however, was suspicious. His suspicion was confirmed when the envoy privately handed a second, more personal letter to Darkness. Her face went pale as she read it. "What is it?" Naruto asked, his eyes scanning her reaction. "It's from my father," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The formal, resolute tone of the knight was gone, replaced by the weary dread of a cornered daughter. "He insists I attend the royal commendation. He says we have family matters to discuss." Naruto took the letter from her trembling hands. It was written in the cold, commanding script of a man used to getting his own way. It spoke of duty, honor, and the untenable position her adventuring lifestyle had put the family in. It was a summons, not an invitation. "It's a trap," Naruto said flatly. "A trap?" Aqua asked, momentarily pulled from her fantasies of royal adoration. "What kind of trap? Are there monsters in the castle?" "Worse," Naruto replied, his gaze on Darkness's stricken face. "Politics." He understood immediately. The fame they had acquired was a double-edged sword. To a powerful noble family like the Dustiness clan, a daughter gaining renown as a common adventurer was an embarrassment. A daughter who was also a key member of the most powerful party in the kingdom, however, was an asset. An asset to be controlled. "He's going to try and force you into something," Naruto stated. "A political marriage, most likely. To leverage our party's fame for his own gain." Darkness couldn't meet his eyes. "Lord Aldarp, a neighboring nobleman, has been trying to acquire some of our family's lands for years. My father has been deep in his debt. A marriage between myself and Aldarp's son would resolve many issues." Quote, "So he's trying to sell you," Naruto said, the words sharp and cold. Darkness flinched. "It is my duty as a noble." "No," Naruto cut her off, his voice absolute. "Your duty is to the oath you swore to me. Your shield is pledged to this party. I won't let your father sell it off to the highest bidder." A flicker of hope sparked in Darkness's eyes, warring with a lifetime of ingrained duty. "But to defy my father, the head of my house, in the royal court, it would be a scandal. My family would be ruined." "Let them be ruined," Naruto said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A family that sees you as a commodity instead of a daughter isn't worth saving." He looked at the three of them, his decision made. "We're going to the capital. But we're not walking into a commendation. We're walking into a fight." The royal capital of Belzerg was a world away from the rustic charm of Axel. Towering white spires, clean, wide boulevards, and nobles in Ilkan finery replaced half-timbered inns and mud-splattered adventurers. The air hummed with a low-level, ambient magic, a product of the countless wards and enchantments that protected the city. It was a gilded cage, and Naruto felt its bars the moment they passed through the main gate. They were escorted to a lavish suite of rooms in a wing of the castle reserved for honored guests. Servants bowed and scraped. The luxury was opulent, designed to impress and intimidate. The audience with the king was scheduled for the following evening, a formal banquet in their honor. The day before was spent in subtle, probing attacks. Noblemen and women, friends of the Dustiness family, happened to run into them in the castle gardens. They praised Darkness for her bravery, before subtly reminding her of her duties, and the sacrifices her father had made for her. They were polite, smiling, and utterly venomous. The main architect of this campaign was a greasy, toad-like man named Lord Aldarp, the very nobleman who sought to own Darkness. He cornered them near a fountain, his son, a preening, arrogant fop named Walther, at his side. "Ah, Lady Lolatina," Aldarp boomed, his eyes flicking over Naruto and the others with disdain. "And these must be your traveling companions. How quaint." He smiled, a predator's grin. "I trust you are ready to put aside these childish games. Your father and I have come to a most beneficial arrangement. My son is quite taken with you." Walther stepped forward, looking Darkness up and down like a prize mare. "Indeed, you have a strong frame. You will bear strong sons for the Aldarp line. Once we have you out of that ridiculous armor and into a proper dress, of course." Darkness stiffened, her hands clenching into fists. The insult, the sheer possessiveness in his tone, was galling. But years of conditioning, of being told to be a proper noble lady, kept her silent. Before she could even formulate a response, Naruto stepped smoothly between her and Walther. He didn't look at the arrogant noble. He looked at Lord Aldarp, his blue eyes as calm and flat as a frozen lake. "Your son has poor taste in conversation," Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of command. "And even poorer judgment if he thinks he is fit to speak to a knight of Lolatina's caliber." Aldarp's smile faltered. "And who are you to speak to me in such a manner, boy?" "A common adventurer. I'm the man who killed 2 of the Demon King's generals while your kingdom's knights were polishing their armor," Naruto replied, his voice still level. "I'm the leader of this party. And Lolatina is not an asset to be traded. She is my shield. If you want her, you'll have to go through me." The threat was unspoken, but it hung in the air, thick and heavy. Aldarp's face purpled with rage. But he saw the unyielding steel in Naruto's eyes and, for once, held his tongue. He grabbed his son's arm and stormed off, muttering threats under his breath. Darkness stared at Naruto's back, her heart pounding. He had defended her, not her body, but her honor. He had called her a knight, and him, a commoner, had stared down one of the most powerful lords in the kingdom without flinching. Later that day, they met the true threat. He introduced himself as the royal advisor, a man named Valerius. He was thin, elegant, with cold, intelligent eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. He carried an air of serene authority. He praised them for their deeds, his words like honey, but as he spoke, Naruto felt it. He activated Sage Mode for a fraction of a second, so fast no one would notice. But it was enough. Underneath the advisor's polished exterior, Naruto sensed it. The same chilling, listless void energy he had felt in Alcanradia. Valerius was one of them. A member of the silenced cult. Nestled at the very heart of the kingdom's power. This wasn't just about Darkness's marriage anymore. This was about Malachor. The advisor was orchestrating things, weakening the kingdom from within. Manipulating its nobles like puppets, preparing it for the perfect silence to come. The forced marriage was likely just one small part of his plan to sow instability. The game had changed. Naruto now knew who the real enemy in this castle was. The royal banquet was a grand affair. The hall was filled with the highest echelons of nobility, all dressed in their finest. The king, a portly but kind-faced man, sat at the head table. Naruto, Aqua, Megumin, and Darkness were seated at a place of honor to his right. Lord Dustiness, Lord Aldarp, and the advisor Valerius were seated to his left. The king gave a short, heartfelt speech, thanking them for their service to the kingdom and awarding them each a medal of honor and a substantial purse of gold. It was all very civil, very polite. And then, as the dessert course was being served, Lord Dustiness stood up. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice ringing with false sincerity. "On this joyous occasion, celebrating these brave heroes, I have another joyous announcement to make. To further cement the bonds of loyalty and strengthen our kingdom, my house and the house of the noble Lord Aldarp have agreed to an alliance. My daughter, Lalatina, is to be wed to his son, Walther. A polite, yet forceful, round of applause filled the hall. It was a public declaration. A masterstroke of political maneuvering. To refuse now would be to publicly humiliate two great houses and insult the king himself. Darkness froze, her face a mask of pale horror. All eyes were on her. She looked at her father, then at the smirking Lord Aldarp. Then at the pleased, knowing smile on Valerius's face. She was trapped. Her sense of duty, her family's honor, the public setting, it was a perfect cage. She looked to Naruto, her eyes pleading. Naruto didn't look angry. He didn't look surprised. He looked calm. He took a slow sip of water, placed the goblet down with a soft click, and stood up. The hall fell silent. Young turned to the orange-clad adventurer. "Your Majesty," Naruto said, his voice respectful but firm, addressing the king directly. "Lord Dustiness speaks of strengthening the kingdom. A noble goal, but this union would do the opposite." Gasps echoed through the hall. Lord Dustiness's face contorted with fury. "How dare you? You have no place." "I have every place," Naruto cut him off, his gaze sweeping across the assembled nobles. "I have bled for this kingdom. Lalatina has bled for this kingdom. Tell me, Walther," he said, his eyes locking onto the foppish young noble, "when was the last tea? Me you faced anything more dangerous than a paper cut?" Walther sputtered, his face turning red. I am a nobleman. I don't fraternize with monsters." "Exactly," Naruto said, his voice like ice. Alatina stood as a shield against a demon king's general and his army of the dead. She did so to protect the very people in this room. She is a hero, a knight of unparalleled courage. And you seek to reward that courage by marrying her to a coward who has never held a real sword in his life. A man whose only accomplishment is his name. He turned back to the king. A marriage should be a union of strength. What strength does this boy bring? What honor? This isn't an alliance to strengthen the kingdom. It is a business transaction to settle a debt. And it is an insult to every true knight who serves you. His words, simple and direct, cut through the political maneuvering like a kunai through silk. He hadn't insulted the nobility. He had championed its highest ideals, honor, strength, and courage, and used those very ideals to expose the sham of the engagement. The king, who was more a good man than a great politician, looked from the humiliated Walther to the proud, resolute Darkness, and then to the unshakable adventurer standing before him. He was beginning to understand. Valerius, seeing the tide turning, stood up smoothly. The adventurer makes a passionate, if crude, point. Perhaps a contest is in order. To prove young Lord Walther's worthiness. A duel, perhaps. It was a calculated move. A commoner, even a famous one, striking a noble in a formal duel would be a scandal in itself. A duel is fine, Naruto agreed easily, a dangerous glint in his eye. But a man's worth isn't just in his sword arm. I challenge him. A duel of swords, a contest of strategy, and a debate on leadership. Let the court see his worthiness for themselves. The king, intrigued, agreed. The contest was set for the following day. It was a slaughter. The duel of swords was over in 5 seconds. Walther, in ornate but impractical armor, charged. Naruto, still in his simple orange jacket, sidestepped and disarmed him with a single, fluid motion, holding the boy's own sword to his throat. He hadn't even drawn a weapon. The contest of strategy was a board game simulating a large-scale battle. Valerius himself officiated. Walther, using conventional tactics taught by royal tutors, was systematically dismantled. Naruto used feints, diversions, and flanking maneuvers that were completely alien to this world's way of war. He sacrificed pawns to achieve tactical superiority, a concept that horrified the onlooking nobles but resulted in a swift, decisive victory. He wasn't just playing a game, he was demonstrating a philosophy of warfare that was centuries beyond their own. The debate on leadership was the final nail in the coffin. When asked what the most important quality of a leader was, Walther spoke of bloodlines, authority, and commanding respect. Naruto simply said, protecting your comrades. A leader who will not throw himself in front of an attack meant for his team is no leader at all. He spoke of shared pain, trust, and earning respect, not demanding it. His words resonated with the knights and soldiers in the hall, the men and women who actually fought. By the end of it, Walther was a humiliated wreck, and Lord Aldarp's reputation was in tatters. Naruto hadn't just defeated them. He had commanded the respect of the entire court through sheer, undeniable competence. During the contests, his party had not been idle. Aqua, claiming the wine had been tainted with demonic lethargy, had insisted on purifying the entire banquet supply, causing chaos among the staff and making several stuffy old lords spit out what was now essentially holy water. Megumin, meanwhile, had quietly cornered a nervous court mage and began a very loud, very detailed discussion about the precise amount of explosive force required to artistically redecorate the main palace spire. A conversation that was quickly reported to the captain of the guard. It was subtle, chaotic intimidation, and it worked wonders. Inspired by Naruto's defense of her, and seeing her father's plan crumble, darkness made her stand. During the final moments of the debate, she stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she announced, her voice ringing with newfound freedom. "I cannot, in good conscience, marry this man. My place is with my party. My shield is pledged to my commander, Naruto Uzumaki. I hereby refuse this engagement, and I renounce that part of my family that would see me as chattel." It was the ultimate defiance. And she delivered it not with anger, but with the calm dignity of a knight true to her code. The situation was at a breaking point. Valerius saw his carefully laid plans unraveling. The instability he had hoped to create was being smoothed over by this anomaly. He needed to reclaim control. "This is an outrage, an affront to the nobility," he declared, his calm facade finally cracking. And in that moment of anger, he made a mistake. His control slipped. The void energy within him flared, a flicker of gray nothingness in his eyes that only Naruto, his senses on high alert, could see. "You," Naruto said, his voice dropping dangerously low as he pointed a finger directly at the royal advisor. "You're one of them." Valerius froze. "I don't know what you're talking." "The silenced cult," Naruto said, the name dropping into the hull like a block of ice. "The void energy. It's all over you. You've been manipulating the court, poisoning it from the inside." Exposed, Valerius panicked. He smashed a small, black crystal on the floor. "Fools! The age of noisy gods and mortal kings is over. Embrace the silence." A rift of pure blackness tore open in the floor of the throne room. From it emerged a creature of nightmare, a being of twisted limbs and silent screams, formed from solidified void energy. It was one of Malikor's foot soldiers. The nobles screamed and scattered. The royal guards, for all their polished armor, were frozen in terror. But Naruto's party was not. They moved as one. "Darkness, shield the king," Naruto commanded. She was already there, a bulwark of steel between the monarch and the monster. "Aqua, sanctify the area. Don't let its aura spread." Aqua raised her staff, and a brilliant blue light flooded the throne room, pushing back against the encroaching void. "Megumin, I know," she yelled, her eye already gleaming with crimson light. She didn't even need a full chant. Explosion. It wasn't her full power spell, but a smaller, contained, tactical blast. The monster, already weakened by Aqua's holy aura and boxed in by Naruto's sudden appearance at its flank, was annihilated in a flash of light. Their teamwork was flawless, instantaneous. A testament to the battles they had fought together. In the confusion, Valerius tried to escape. But a single shadow clone appeared before him, a kunai at his throat. The fight was over. The king, pale but unharmed, stared at the scene. He looked at the smoking crater in his throne room floor, at the captured, traitorous advisor, and at the 4 adventurers standing calmly amidst the chaos. He finally understood. These were not mere adventurers. They were the kingdom's true shield. That evening, the king nullified the engagement contract. Lord Dustiness was stripped of his titles for colluding with a traitor. His house disgraced. As a reward for exposing the plot and saving his life, the king granted Naruto a minor noble title of his own, Baron of Axel, and gifted him a large, currently unused mansion on the outskirts of the town. They returned to Axel not to their cramped inn, but to a sprawling, ridiculously large estate. As they stood in the grand, dusty foyer, the mood was celebratory. Darkness approached Naruto, her expression soft, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Naruto, thank you. You're the one who stood up to them," he replied. "You made your own choice." "Only because you showed me it was possible," she said, her voice thick with emotion. For my whole life, I've been torn between the dutiful daughter and the other part of me. I thought I had to be one or the other. You didn't just defend me. You gave me the freedom to be both the knight and the woman I want to be. You gave me a purpose that is truly my own. She looked at him, her heart in her eyes. Her devotion no longer just that of a knight to a lord, but of a woman to the man who had set her free. Naruto looked around the ridiculous mansion, at Aqua who was already planning where to put her sacred fountain. At Megumin who was eyeing the west lawn for its optimal blast radius. He looked at Darkness, her face glowing with a genuine, happy smile. They were a chaotic, dysfunctional, impossible family. And this was their home. Chapter 5 End.